Breathing became controlled, measured, shared, because the air no longer belonged to anyone. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 10, Synchronization. The first time it worked, no one understood why. At 600 UTC, in a partially occupied upper floor of a commercial tower, a group of 11 individuals remained after selection had reduced their numbers overnight. The air was still insufficient, but more stable than before. Breathing was controlled, deliberate, measured. One of them began counting, not out loud, internally. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. The others followed without being told, not consciously. The effect was immediate, not relief, but alignment. Their breathing stabilized, not individually, but collectively. The strain did not disappear, but it stopped worsening. For the first time in hours, no one felt the sharp panic of incomplete inhalation. At 6:12 UTC, one of them broke the rhythm, just slightly, too fast. The effect spread instantly. Breathing destabilized across the group. Panic returned, not emotional, physiological, unavoidable. Within seconds, the pattern was restored, not by instruction, by necessity. At 700 UTC, similar reports, though not formally recorded, emerged in other structures. Groups that stabilized their breathing patterns lasted longer. Groups that did not, did not. At 7:30 UTC, Layla Rahmani tested it deliberately. She had remained between levels, in a space with fewer occupants. The air was thinner here, less competition, but also less circulation. She listened. The pattern returned faintly, distant, structured. She matched it. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. Her breathing stabilized, not improved, but controlled. She adjusted slightly, too fast. The effect was immediate. Her chest tightened. Air felt insufficient again. She returned to the pattern. The pressure eased. At 8:10 UTC, she wrote it down. Deviation increases consumption. At 8:40 UTC, another realization followed. The system was no longer passive. It was conditional. At 900 UTC, in one building, a group enforced synchronization, not by teaching, by correction. Those who could not maintain the rhythm were removed, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. At 9:45 UTC, the pattern became visible across structures. Groups that aligned survived longer. Groups that did not collapsed faster. At 10:20 UTC, the acoustic signal returned. 58 seconds, clear, stable. For the first time, it matched human breathing capacity precisely. Not too fast, not too slow. Sustainable. At 10:50 UTC, Layla stopped thinking of it as sound. It was a template. At 11:15 UTC, she considered the implication fully. The gas was not just displacing oxygen, it was interacting with respiration. Not chemically, functionally. At 11:40 UTC, she wrote, "Only synchronized respiration minimizes loss." She paused, then added, "Everyone else accelerates depletion." At 12 o'clock UTC, the first coordinated enforcement group formed. They maintained rhythm collectively. They monitored each other. They removed disruption. No discussion, no negotiation, only continuation. At 12:40 UTC, one member failed to maintain timing, just once. The group corrected immediately. When correction failed, they acted. The removal was fast. The group stabilized. At 13:10 UTC, Layla understood the final structure forming. Not society, not hierarchy, a system. Participation was not optional. It was required. At 13:45 UTC, multiple groups independently reached the same conclusion. Breathing must be synchronized, or not at all. At 1420 UTC, the distinction between individuals weakened. People no longer breathed for themselves. They breathed with the group. At 1500 UTC, independent survival became impossible. No one could maintain the pattern alone. Isolation led to rapid failure. At 1530 UTC, the first isolated individual was observed attempting synchronization without a group. They matched the pattern briefly, then drifted, then collapsed. At 1600 UTC, Layla made a decision. She moved upward again, not for air, for alignment. At 1640 UTC, she reached a group maintaining stable rhythm. They did not welcome her. They observed. She matched the pattern perfectly. They allowed her to remain. At 1720 UTC, no one spoke. Speech disrupted rhythm. Communication became minimal, necessary. At 1800 UTC, atmospheric levels dropped again. This time, the effect was different. Groups that maintained synchronization remained stable. Groups that did not collapsed immediately. At 1840 UTC, the gap widened, not between strong and weak, between aligned and unaligned. At 1910 UTC, Layla stopped writing, not because there was nothing left, but because the system was complete. At 2000 UTC, the acoustic pattern extended, 65 seconds, then repeated, unbroken. At 2100 UTC, humanity had adapted, not through innovation, through reduction. Fewer people, less variation, more uniform behavior. At 2200 UTC, the last independent actions occurred. After that, everything was synchronized. At 2300 UTC, no one resisted. Not because they agreed, because resistance could not be sustained. At 0100 UTC, oxygen levels dropped again. The unknown gas increased. At 100 UTC, survival required perfection. Anything less was removed. At 0200 UTC, breathing was no longer natural. It was performed. At 0300 UTC, humanity no longer lived. It synchronized. Thanks for listening to Chapter 10, Synchronization. If you like our show, please subscribe and share with your friends and family. For a moment, it worked, but systems always fail. Chapter 11 continues. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.